Laurie with To the Trade, and I have a special guest here. Hi, Guy. Nice to meet you again.
Hey,
But I want
Laurie.
to introduce you to our wonderful audience of interior designers. You are the founder of Mattoboard, and I am thrilled to talk to you because I ran into your product in Paris with Sabina. You're one of the people who works for you. I've looked at it extensively. I've introduced it to several designers at this point. I'm a big super fan. So
All right. All right.
this is
Amazing.
gonna this is going to be a really fun interview. But I wanted to start. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell our community of interior designers a little bit about you and what you do and what you did before you started Mattoboard?
Okay. So my name's Guy Ailion, and my background is in architecture and interior design, actually practicing as an architect. And I've been working in design for the last 2 decades. I started off doing boutique barefoot luxury hotels and villas on islands for sort of celebrities or wealthy hotel chains. And eventually found myself in London, where I run a very successful architecture and interior design practice called KSR Architects and Interior Designers. And the work that we do there is mostly for either sort of celebrity homes or ultra high net worth individuals. And we do private housing, residential work, and anything from a construction value of like 5 million to 150 million. So big, complicated projects, sometimes very difficult clients, but always very rewarding. And it was through that work that I actually started to invest more time on the interior design side with our interior design director. And I became very familiar with the interior designer's workflow, which is actually very different to the architect's like workflow and how the architects think, which is also very, very fascinating for me. That's just the psychology of the two sort of scales of thinking. And I worked very closely with her and the team. And that's when I became quite familiar with the the painful problem of physical sampling, which I'm happy to talk about too.
I, honestly, this is something that I know designers have experienced here in the United States as well. We have, lots and lots of designers who have large firms, 10 designers on the team,
Mm,
and managing the sample library has always been
yeah.
an incredibly time-consuming challenge because it's just really difficult to keep everything organized. I mean, and on top of other problems like deleting items that you no longer need or discontinue. I mean, how does anyone manage that process when things can be discontinued at the drop of a hat? We in the
Yeah.
United States are experiencing a very different shift where there are now we're in an uncertain world about what is tariffed and what isn't. So the whole scheme of what is available to the American market is just changing on a daily basis at this point. And so that alone is just there's no way any human could keep up with knowing what the catalog of what is available, what is discontinued, what is still. I mean, you might have a sample library with thousands of samples, and there could be a percentage of 30% that is just not even a viable product to utilize, even if you found it and it was perfect for a client to present. So
So, right. I mean,
I
we
see the
found,
problem. I really do.
yeah, all of that resonates with me on a daily basis. Something like 95% of the samples that would live in our physical sample library, we would never use. And every year we'd have a librarian who would come in and they'd sift through all the materials, and they just pile up boxes and boxes of stuff that's out of order. It's no longer in stock. It's no longer current or useful to us. And we would try and donate these to local arts and crafts stores, to students, but mostly they would get
Sure.
thrown away. Um,
Yeah.
and so it was very clear that the process was broken, but it goes even deeper. Just ordering physical samples for the process of just mixing and matching takes too long. Anything from 24 hours to a week. And in some cases, there are pieces of products, let's say a beautiful tap or a really nice pool handle or something that has a lot of rich detail. these are very expensive pieces of product engineering, and they're very, very valuable to the suppliers, and they can't sample those to everybody. It's just not
Right.
possible for them. It's extremely expensive. It would be extremely wasteful. It already is. And so they have to limit their exposure, who they can send it to, which means that designers are also limited to what they can get their hands in front of. And, you know, designers think with their eyes, and we have this insatiable need for like new things and more things and options. And even if we had 1,000 things in our studio library, the reality is like it's very difficult to capture all of that in a way that is useful to us. We have you'll have these catalogs, these filofaxes with tiny little pieces of like leather samples or composites or little terrazzos, and then you'll have like a huge wood sample or a marble sample. And how you put those even together to try and like
Sure.
brainstorm and mix and match is already like a broken process. So I did find that anyone under the age of 40 in my office was no longer even walking into the sample library to start their journey. It wasn't fast enough, not efficient enough. They were trying to do these things online. And that was the opportunity that
I
we saw.
Well, this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on because you speak the language of designers and you understand what it is that the designers, the pain point that really is there with managing the sampling library, keeping the sample library current, handling, that time constraint. And I love that you just said that designers, specify and select with their eyes because that is 1000% true. I mean, I've never met a designer that wasn't, a visual learner. So,
Yeah.
that is how they learn, that's how they process, that's how they explain. It's all visual. Now, was Mattoboard your concept? Did you come up with this idea? How did you think of I mean, there were always digital mood boards. I've seen digital mood boards
Yes.
for the past 12 years, but when I first saw Mattoboard, immediately this was something different. This was something very, very different than anything I've ever seen. And it was the first one that felt like a real, you know, presentation that you would give a client that showed real materials. I mean, it wasn't like pictures of things on a digital, like, craft board type thing where you're just like literally putting, and it's like you don't know what the scale is, you don't know what the sheen is, you don't know what that looks like in real life. I mean, it could be a completely different color. Those kinds of things have been around since I remember even like years ago doing oleo board and you could
All right.
totally
Yeah.
manipulate every angle of it and you feel the color was completely off. I mean, it just wasn't representative of what a designer would ever present to a client in any real
So,
way.
you've touched on a lot of things that we
Sure.
try and achieve in the product. So maybe what I'll explain first is just let's get a definition of what we do. So Matterboard is an online tool for discovering materials, right, and creating the material boards, but it's all in 3D. So you experience these products in 3D. You look at their shape, their texture. You can see the patina in the finish. You can see if it's glossy, if it's matte, if it's honed. You can also make adjustments as well. And this is within every category of material. So it is an opportunity under one lighting condition, we think of it as a virtual table where you can find and source these virtual samples in one place and mix and match them and make those iterations like between a leather that's got a metallic finish or a deep sort of grain to something that is more glossy with a very fine grain to it and a slightly more mahogany color versus a aubergine color. You make these decisions on Matterboard in split seconds, right? Because these are all 3D materials accessed within one click or one drag into the scene. And so we're trying to recreate this experience that you have in your studio table. Like we're not trying to create some new way of mixing and matching. Designers think with their eyes and their hands. In this case, we're just substituting the hand with the mouse. And the process is the same. You drag and drop them into a studio. It's all one lighting environment. You get to see all the materials, all in the right scale, all with the right sort of color and pattern and texture, rich detail. You can even examine them. So this is a future that we're spearheading. Um, and with it comes in not only just a new tool of Mattoboard, but also a new category, which we call virtual sampling and visual concepting, which we think will be the future. I think it's a no-brainer the more we talk to designers and suppliers, because this is the first time it's a win-win for both sides. We're going to reduce physical sampling by an order of magnitude, while at the same time increasing like your optionality and creativity, right? Like it happens simultaneously. So it's a really
Sure.
it's a magic moment for an industry that this is possible, and it became possible a couple of years ago when we started building Matterboard. And we think this is sort of the future of design tools. But there was something else that you mentioned, which is interesting, which is obviously the way that designers think, which is core to like how we're trying to create these future tools. So, if this is interesting to you and your listeners, it's always been very interesting to me as a designer and just understanding the differences even between architects and interior designers. And I think it's relevant to the future of tools is that designers are visual thinkers, but we're spatial thinkers too. And there is even a part in the brain. These are like two separate ways of thinking. There's a part of the brain that's called the ventral stream. Maybe going a little bit too deep, but it's one of the main pathways in your brain for like processing visual information. And what happens is that it's often called the what pathway because it helps you recognize different objects, what they are, what the color is, what texture they are. This is very pronounced in interior designers. We study objects, right? We hold them in our hands and we look at them and we move them around and we put a terrazzo next to a brushed metal, next to a fluffy material, and we make these decisions and we flip them around. So what's happening is that the primary visual cortex, the back of the brain, gets the information, it runs towards the temporal lobe, and this helps us identify what objects are. But we have a totally separate place called the dorsal stream, which is part of our brain which understands spaces and how objects sit in spaces. And the reason why I think this is important is it's actually part of like Matterboard's future is understanding how the designer thinks, is that we're developing a product now, which is called Design Stream. And you can see where the reference comes from. And the Design Stream is like one of the things we're most excited about this category that we're creating, virtual sampling, is, of course, what happens when we have the next million SKUs of products online? Well, you have this paradox of choice, which is like, frightening for interior designers when you have so many options. It's like worse than having 1,000 items in your studio library. But it's also very exciting because you get what you want when you need it. So how do we get designers to find what they're looking for very quickly? And this is important because we need to understand how they think. And sometimes designers think in a very sometimes designers have these two modes of thinking. One is very fluid. It's like, I need the space to feel warm and cozy and have a mid-century modern like feeling, but at the same time to be quite progressive. And these are very fluid things. They mean different things to different people. They're quite subjective. But then sometimes the design is extremely linear. They know exactly what the object is that they're looking for. I need a honed marble for a reception in a New York hotel lobby. It needs to be commercial grade, slip resistance of R2, 2-hour fire rating. And we need to be able to help them find those products immediately in one place and then put that into a visual board, which can also look very beautiful for a client presentation. And so that's the challenge, and that's what we're building with Design Stream and Mattoboard.
Well, I had no idea. I mean, I've seen Mattoboard as it is today, and you really look at, if you're thinking about like a Cosentino countertop, you can look at it, in different finishes. You can see
Yes.
the thickness. It's almost like it's real. I mean, it's really, really very cool to watch. And of course, comparing that to a metal, maybe a Brizo faucet, and you're looking at that and you're looking at how the light shines on it as it goes across the metals. And it's fascinating to me, but then adding on that there would be that ability to just source what is out there in the world, in the ether. That comes up all the time for designers because they're
Yeah.
constantly being given, I'm sure you have the same issues. Like here, a client found something on Pinterest, or they went to a hotel and they took a picture of something and they want that or something like it in their home and or in their commercial project. And I mean, a designer doesn't know every single thing, every single product ever made. I mean, they're
Yeah.
very good product catalogs within each individual designer, but there's just so many new things every single day. And I think that's actually a core reason why I've pulled interior designers numerous times and so few of them have really fully designed their own homes. And it's because
Right.
of this
Right.
this
Yeah.
factor, right? There's just so many decisions that they have. It's almost like they know too much, right? They know too much. And they know that on top of that, there's something new coming out in 2 months that they're going to love as well. And it puts them in a paralysis mode about their own house, their own home, their
Yeah.
own environment. So,
Yeah. There's a
with
whole other
clients,
conversation
yeah,
about how
with
we can
clients,
make
it's just
decisions for clients, and it's so difficult to
that
make
is
them for
so
ourselves. Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That you're really examining how we think and how that process can be streamlined for a designer because time is money for them,
Yeah.
and the wasting of time in sourcing and in finding the right product. Every day I would say thousands of design. I mean, it's like the old, you know, factor of like, a finding the right, light fixture sometimes can cost as much as the light fixture itself costs. And explaining
Okay.
that
You
to the
nailed
client,
it. Yeah.
it's
You nailed it.
terrible.
Um,
I
uh,
mean,
the reality is like the creativity shouldn't, the creativity is what we should be charging for. As designers, we should be charging for our creativity. This is what makes us unique and special. But we shouldn't be charging necessarily for our administration. But what happens is that we'll end up doing more administrating to find things. And so that kind of goes into our hours, which makes us feel like we're charging less for our creativity. It's like, it really shouldn't be this way. And I think that this is where sort of Matterboard's future is aiming at, is we want designers to do more creating, less administrating. You should just be able to find what you're looking for very quickly and then iterate and change ideas. And if your client comes up with a reference picture of something that you like, well, Matterboard should be able to find you those materials and those products that are within your local area. And maybe you want to value engineer them and do a more effective version because the client's given you some, beautiful villa in the south of France with expensive materials, and you're somewhere else where you need to source like more affordable versions of those products. That is the future that I think is going to be possible. It's very soon. We're very close to launching it, and it comes on the back of us being able to have this incredibly large library of materials virtually, which we do at the moment. And then I guess one of the other things I wanted to touch on there, which you were talking about, is you said that, which I appreciate. You said Matterboard was one of the first times you've seen like very beautiful boards, and this is great. I love that you say that because beautiful boards, beautiful things is like the business that we're in as designers. And every presentation I would put together in front of my client is a reflection of me. And that's why designers will toil for hours over InDesign or Canva or whatever they use to make their presentations, to make it look very, very beautiful. They're extremely proud of the way that they present their work. And it's not just our pride that's at stake here. It's the ability to sell your vision. And when you put beautiful boards together, when they're composed beautifully, then that allows you to sell this vision that you've got of these materials and how they look together, how they sit together, shouldn't just be spread out on a page. That's why we compose these beautiful boards. That's why we're attracted to them. And so Mattoboard, of course, is this workforce where you can find these products and mix and match them, and you can generate material spec sheets and have links to all the products, websites. You can do all that in Mattoboard, but you can also add a beautiful leaf to the product, to the mood board, or throw in like a Polaroid. And this is what we, because we're designers designing it, understand is extremely important to the storytelling of sample boards. They're not just utilitarian spec sheets.
Right.
They're both. They're that, and they're a visual way of expressing our designs, and they communicate our personalities, and they sell the vision. And we're in the business of selling dreams.
Yes. And honestly, that's what it does. I mean, in looking at it, and I've, you know, I've thrown it out since we've spoken privately. I've shown it to many designers and we've had conversations about it. And there is a little bit of a learning curve, I will say, from the designer perspective, but I actually love that because I think that it doesn't come across to me, and I think the designers, the feedback was good too, that it doesn't come across as a hobbyist product. It doesn't come
Right.
across as this is how a consumer could DIY their own design. It doesn't come across in that way and at all. It feels incredibly professional and it feels like a representation of what a professional design firm would offer to a client. And it looks like that and it feels like that. And even the usability, it takes a minute to use it because there's a lot of moving parts and it's very technical and it's not just, an iPad game where you're pointing and
Yeah.
pulling and,
Right.
just putting things on a little sheet type thing. It's very interesting to me. And I also, I'll go in another question. Something else that we brought up was that there are, material services now that you can order samples. And, you brought to me a very interesting point that because the friction of ordering samples has decreased with these sample ordering companies, that designers were ordering maybe too much and a lot was maybe being wasted, even though some you do return, they're in that process. And so I actually took it upon myself to actually go out and ask manufacturers if that was true. And I
Hmm.
found out that that absolutely is true. So
Okay.
that,
Fact,
and that there
fact
is
checked there by Laurie. I love
fact
it. I
check.
love
Absolutely.
it. No,
Quite a
that's
few
great.
manufacturers reached out to me and told me that that is an internal problem that they're trying to address now themselves because the lowering the friction of sample demand and then causes a lost cost for a brand to keep up with that sampling demand. And even if the samples are returned, they're not always returned in exceptionally good quality to be passed on to another
Yeah.
designer. And so this is absolutely being talked about by every brand behind the scenes, because these are loss leaders for a design company and they're built in and baked into the price
Totally.
of the product. So
Um,
it's something that we need to be concerned about. I mean, I know designers we don't like to think, I mean, it's part of business. And so we assume that the manufacturer has to have these samples and we have to have access to them because people like to look and touch things.
yeah.
But there is a certain threshold to that and a certain cost to that. And so when it isn't necessary, when there is something that is close and that clients can feel it or feel like they are feeling it, then that's a wonderful solution because it does save money all the way around and time and friction, within a brand. And absolutely the companies that I talk to internally are having conversations about how they're going to handle that because there is a limit to what they can do,
No, I
how many
think
samples they can process.
with any new technology or new solution that is novel and effective, what typically happens is that friction is removed from somewhere. And when friction is removed, it creates a much easier ability to do the thing because there's less friction. And therefore it creates abundance of that thing. And I'm talking in abstracts, but if you think about email, email at one point was incredibly hard. You'd have to have a dial-up connection. You'd have to have access to that dial-up. Then you would need to have a computer. You'd have to understand really the basics of code in order to get the computer client to talk to another client. It was complicated. Then eventually new technology was created. Email became frictionless. It was easy to just write something and send something. And so that friction was removed, which means the behavior became abundant. And that's just generally the pattern of like,
Right. Which is why I have so much spam. That's why I have so much spam in my inbox right now.
that's why you have so much spam. And so what happens if you make the physical sampling extremely accessible and easy for the designers? Of course, you've removed huge amounts of friction, and so they're going to do it a lot more, right? That's just the nature of the friction being removed from an existing behavior, and so that's why there's so much more sampling that happens. But and then we have this problem because it's supposed to be sustainable, but it's not. Now there's like way more logistics happening, way more samples being ordered, where the friction actually meant there was slightly less happening. And you'd think
Right.
carefully
Well, I
before you
actually
order
also
it.
heard, yeah, I also heard that there's incredible amount of
Huge amounts of
packaging
packaging too.
in each
Yes.
sample, and that's
And
another factor that, you might be opening a huge box and it's a small little
totally.
sample that has cardboard and plastic and shrink wrap and padding and
Yeah.
all of that.
It-
It's like
yeah.
Amazon. Amazon was supposed to be saving us from having to go out and find the right product. I didn't have to go to 50 stores to find a
Yeah.
green pair of tights, but now I get the green pair of tights in a huge box, which is not
So,
necessarily the
so you're
best
right. And so what
thing.
happens is that the responsibility of like sustainable decision making falls on the designer. And I don't think that should be the case. It's not fair. The designer just wants to do what they need to do, which is to make creative decisions, to iterate, to see loads of options. That's part of the creative process. Like messiness is the evidence of our craft. It's loads of stuff around us. All of our studio is always full of things. We like that. We surround ourselves with things that inspire us, and we like optionality. And so the sustainable side of it shouldn't fall on the designer by making them mean that they should be less creative. Like that doesn't make sense. And so where the sustainability part should come in is that a sustainable solution should be sustainable for the designer in terms of their work process, and then sustainable for the suppliers in terms of their logistics and their costs. And that's why virtual sampling is a must. It needs to exist because it gives all that optionality back to the designer, endless creative and professional options. And for the suppliers, it means that we
Yeah.
call it ROSI, return on sampling investment. And when it is Christmas to order samples and designers order a hell of a lot of samples, the return on sampling investment goes down for brands and manufacturers because there's a lot more sampling with not a lot of thinking behind it. There's no friction. They don't have to like really pick up a phone call. And so they sample a lot more, they pay for it. There's loads more waste, loads more logistics, but they don't see the return on investment go up. It actually goes down. But if the designer can curate and make multiple decisions without any waste online with high fidelity and realism and see the products together under one lighting condition, beautiful idea. If they can do that and then get close to their conviction, then they order the physical sample.
Right.
And now the return on sampling investment goes up. Because at the end of the day, 100% designers need to touch and feel the products. And that's a huge part of what we do. It's part of our quality control. But our clients are very happy to see iterations and ideas pulled together very quickly, all before you need to order the physical sample. It's like you could show designer this beautiful composition with this multicolored terrazzo and all the other materials that you want. And then they say, oh, I don't really like multicolored terrazzo. I was hoping for black and white. Well, instead of you having to now order another physical sample and build that beautiful board again, you just change it on Mattoboard with a virtual sample to a black and white one. And then the client can say, oh, black and white's nice, but actually I want marble. Okay, it's no problem. It's no friction. I just look for a
Right.
marble that's appropriate and I change it. And we could do this online. We can do it in seconds. And then when we're happy with the composition, all right, let's order some samples. Let's quality check them. I'm not going to I'm not going to pay for $200,000 worth of flooring for a hotel without seeing the physical sample at the end of the day. Yeah.
Sure. I love that though. I mean, I think that this is solving a real problem for the manufacturers and for the designers. And the idea that this will
Mm.
that you will also be a resource to be able to, find and execute product discovery is really, really interesting to me because I think that's a major issue for designers. There's just so many products out there and discovery and education and finding those new products are always that are trade products are always very, it's just such a challenge. do you have any anticipation of way down the line? I'm assuming virtual reality, augmented reality, connection to like, some of the AI features that are allowing these products to go into, rendering processes and that kind of thing. Is there any part of it that wants to connect into that world?
Yes. Yeah, I think that that is a natural evolution. There are some things on the horizon. I would say definitely stay tuned. The first thing we're actually executing right now is a more immediate need for the designers, which is teams, collaboration amongst teams.
Yes.
So as Mattoboard's been growing in the tens of thousands of users, a lot of the large firms and small boutique firms are saying, well, I want to be able to share my board with my colleague, and I want to be able to collaborate on a board like we would doing around a table in real life. And I want to share it with my client, but I also want to save material libraries. These are my favorite liquid metal materials. These are our office-wide flooring materials that we use, and these are the manufacturers. And I want to collaborate that and share that with our team. So that is actually shipping now this week.
Oh,
And
wow.
we will build on that iteratively with the feedback that we get. We are very much a led by our design community company. So you said like in the beginning, I think you said it had a bit of a learning curve. So we're always open to improve. And so we definitely encourage feedback. So Teams is a big part, like that's going out now. But if we like take a step back and what's happening with AI and 3D, which is probably the source of the question that you're asking, at the end of the day, we do assemble these mood boards and these material boards, and we find specific materials. But the other big part of the design process is visualizing them, right? Selling them. And I think that in the very, very near future, there's no better time to be a designer than today. I genuinely believe that. I think it's the most exciting time to be a designer. And that the future of interior design isn't just about creativity, but it's about collaborating with intelligent tools. And the designers who adapt will win the next decade of design. And what are those tools going to do for us? And I think they're going to allow us to visualize our ideas very quickly. And if I think about this is probably one of the biggest like fundamental shifts that's going to happen in the interior designer's workflow. And is that what we do now is we sort of draft to visualize our work. What I mean by that, what I encapsulate in drafting, I mean, we do the sketching, we do the measuring, we do the modeling, we do the CAD, we do the plans, we do the sourcing, we do all this hard work, this drafting work, this dry work, and then we produce a visualization. But it's the visualization that is the point in which our clients actually give us feedback, right? This is when they say, oh yeah, I kind of like that light, but I wanted something that's more elegant, and oh, I don't like that marble veining, I want something else. And what you have to do is go back to the drafting process and change things and find new materials or change the whole design, change the layout, all the way up to build this visualization again and get feedback. And this is just part of our process, how we work. And I think what will happen from 2025 onwards, and this is why I say stay tuned to what we're building, is that you will visualize to draft, which means that the gap between your idea and a vision of your idea is going to become extremely small, almost real time, that gap, which means that we will visualize our general idea, get client feedback, and visualize it again, get client feedback, and have this great loop, right, between our creative exploration of our vision and and our clients. And then when we've got closer to what the client and you are happy with, then you start the drafting work. And it's a much more effective future for us. And I think that that is what makes it such an exciting time to be a designer. So the visualization component is a big part of our future,
Oh, absolutely.
but we are on a mission to make tools that are easy for designers, but that are also effective. Like no one wants designers don't want generative AI. They want supportive and practical AI, if you could call it that. Like I want to know that that's my material. That's the material I chose. That's my client's existing floor. This is the porcelain
Right.
tile I've
I
chosen,
think
and
so
this is my
too.
visualization. That's what they want, and that's what we're prepared to give them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I think that designers are craving, because they certainly don't want, you know, the world to change just because, I mean, AI has gotten, generative AI has gotten kind of crazy, and I think there are a lot of designers who are a little threatened by it because they see it as a, this would enable
Mm.
designers or, consumers to create their own DIY future, and design products being accessible in that way. But I mean, design has always been such an integral part of service, and very custom, and understanding nuance, and I don't think a computer is ever going to handle the million decisions that a designer really boils down and presents accurately. I mean, you can look at a lot of pictures of sofas, but one might be actually last 20 years and one might last 6 months. You know what I mean? And they could look very similar on the screen. And so I'm not
Well,
really.
j just think about think about those conversations you said you had with interior designers, that as soon as they
Yeah.
start to design their own home, they are paralyzed by
Yes.
the blank canvas. So clients are just going to have that too, you know.
Yeah.
I think, you know, with groundbreaking technology like we're seeing happening around us, I think what ends up happening is that you have certain tools that die, but the trade and the designer is the most important part in this world. We are the curators. We are like the orchestrators of a symphony. And the reality is that interior design or architecture is extremely nuanced. It's not just about a pretty picture. There is so much that goes into just balancing texture, quality, mood, the personality of one client versus, you know, the husband and wife, and managing that, and and filtering through the plethora of options that you have out there, and quality of materials and build and combinations and site specifications, and the way that
Delivery
light
time,
falls
right?
into a
Just
room, and
the whole
what does it
thing.
feel
Yeah.
like at 12 midday, and you know, what does the orientation of the room feel like, what are the, you know, what's the size of the ceiling. It's an unbelievable amount of decision making, unbelievable. So no, I just think I genuinely think designers are going to be totally empowered. And
I love that. I love that's such a positive thing to say right now, because I know there are
yeah,
so
and I
many
genuinely believe
people
it. Yeah,
listening that really don't are concerned. And I agree with you 1,000%. I think that is absolutely true. And that these are tools that you must jump on and learn and get better at using, because that will be, the differentiator between success and not success. I mean, these are tools. It's like the
totally.
internet came about, and people jumped in and learned, and people who didn't, and
Yeah.
were thinking that they didn't need a website, things like that. They would always be in the yellow
Designers
pages.
need to be, they need to be way more confident. You know, like design isn't about drawing lines. It's about shaping ideas. And AI is just the ultimate idea amplifier. We're still doing the ones shaping the ideas. It's just going to be there to fuel idea amplification for us. And so, you know, designers need to have way more confidence. And, you know, we're also very familiar with 3D software, and 3D is, it's not just a tool. I think you spoke about, you know, are we going to do virtual headsets and that kind of thing? But I think 3D isn't just a tool. This is like the language of modern day design. We CAD, we 3D model, we build SketchUps, we think in 3D, we think spatially. We spoke about that already, like right at the beginning. You know, we think very, very spatially and visually as designers. And so it's about time that materials and products get become part of that workflow of 3D, which is where we see virtual sampling becoming a no-brainer for the future.
Let me ask you, have there been, are you using Mattoboard within your own practice now? And are you getting the yes from clients without having to do a physical sample? I'm just curious.
So our trade is actually luxury, sort of super high-end luxury design. And so there is a different, the client specification is different across, you know, the budget constraints and briefing. We're using Mattoboard. In fact, we were trying to do 3D material boards before Mattoboard existed to service our international clients and the fast-paced nature of dealing with them. And that's when I understood that it's slightly anecdotal, but it's interesting to the origin of Mattoboard, is that it was COVID that hit. And COVID meant that no one could physically go to the physical material library. And so we were doing all of our work collaboratively online on Slack and so on. And that's when we started to actually try and build 3D material boards using very difficult rendering software and very good but complicated 3D practices to do it. And our clients loved it. And we'd send them the presentation. They were like, this is great. And eventually then we would source materials and get them shipped to them and get a copy sent to our office. And so that we were getting buy-in before Matterboard existed. So we understood that this was a future. And so still today, but in this
Wow.
very, very high-end luxury market, a lot of the products are bespoke. And so you can do some tweaking on Matterboard, but then we would want to get it a sample physically made. But that's very expensive. So it's even better now because we get a whole composition. We're like, yeah, that's great. The corners should be super glossy. And then we can get it made. Whereas, if we would otherwise have to order a matte one, a sheen, an eggshell, a super gloss, and then have to look at them and throw the four that we don't need out. But at least in
I love
it's
that. We actually have lots of designers in our community who do a lot of custom, a lot of luxury because, in the United States, it's a very big problem that designers are shopped. And so the designers that work in the luxury space in our market tend to prefer custom product because they actually make more money on those product lines than they do if they're buying
right.
retail, obviously. So, there's a ton of designers that have numerous resources for custom products. And I didn't realize that you could actually do some ideation of custom products also on Matterboard. That's fantastic to hear because I think there are a lot of designers who would love to be able to show like this is the material and how it looks and we can go, these are different stain options or these are the different, ways we could go with this so that we can make everything truly exactly the way you want it.
Yeah, there is some sort of fine editing that you can do on Matterboard too. So you can, of course, just mix and match products together, but you can also then start to edit some of the properties, sort of break the preset version of it, and then make things more glossy, make things more metallic. You can tweak the coloring, etc. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's really wonderful for the designers. Well, thank you so much. This has been such an eye-opening experience, and I hope that our listeners are going to jump in and sign up and play around with Matterboard because I think it really is a game changer for interior designers. I've been looking at it quite a bit. I think the materials that you already have in the library are fantastic, but I know you're adding more all the time. And I just can't wait to see where it goes. I'm very excited about it.
Laurie, that was great. It was a high energy chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Happy to have you. Bye.